Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up, if thou wilt ever dig. Those words from Marcus Aurelius, written nearly 2,000 years ago, while he ruled an empire under constant threat, still ring with startling urgency today. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed by the news, by personal setbacks, by the sheer unpredictability of life. Now picture the Roman emperor who penned those lines, steering his civilization through wars, plagues, and political intrigue, yet finding stillness in the storm. That's the power of Stoicism, not as a relic of ancient history, but as a living toolkit for outthinking chaos, whether it's on the world stage or in the quiet corners of your daily life. What if I told you that the same mental frameworks used by philosophers like Seneca to endure Nero's tyranny, or by Epictetus to thrive after being exiled, could help you navigate modern challenges with that same unshakable clarity? This video isn't just about history, it's about decoding 24 timeless cognitive patterns, refined by Stoic thinkers, that turn adversity into advantage. These aren't abstract ideas, they're battle-tested strategies for disarming fear, dismantling overwhelm, and making decisions that align with your deepest values even when pressure mounts. Consider this: every era has its chaos, but the most resilient minds from ancient Rome to today share a common thread. They don't just survive turmoil, they use it as fuel. Whether you're facing a toxic work environment, societal divisions, or the weight of personal uncertainty, the Stoics mapped a path forward. Over the next minutes, we'll explore how their principles can help you rewire reactions, spot hidden opportunities in crisis, and cultivate what Marcus Aurelius called the inner citadel, that unassailable space of calm judgment no external force can breach. This is philosophy as a verb, not a theory. Ready to dig? The first and most fundamental pattern in the Stoic toolkit is what Epictetus called the dichotomy of control, a simple but radical idea that cuts through noise like a scalpel. Picture this: a former slave who became one of history's greatest teachers, Epictetus, sitting in his humble Greek schoolhouse telling his students, "There are things within our power and things not within our power." That single sentence, written 2 millennia ago, contains the master key to mental freedom. It's not about ignoring reality or pretending hardship doesn't exist. It's about redirecting your energy with surgical precision. Take a modern dilemma like workplace stress. You can't control a micromanaging boss, sudden layoffs, or a colleague's bad attitude. Those sit firmly in the not within our power column. But here's the pivot: you can control how you prepare for meetings, the effort you put into your work, and most importantly, how you interpret events. The Stoics weren't advocating passivity, they were teaching strategic focus. When you stop wasting mental energy on what you can't change, something remarkable happens. You gain immense leverage over what you can. Try this exercise right now. Grab a sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, list your current stressors that are truly uncontrollable: global events, other people's choices, traffic jams. On the other, write actions within your sphere, your morning routine, how you respond to criticism, where you direct your attention. That blank page becomes a mirror, reflecting where your agency actually lies. This isn't just philosophy, it's cognitive jiu-jitsu, using the weight of chaos to flip it into clarity. What makes this pattern so potent is its scalability. It works just as powerfully for a parent managing toddler meltdowns as it did for Seneca navigating the whims of Emperor Nero. The goal isn't to eliminate discomfort, but to relocate your center of gravity, from reacting to external storms to standing firm in your inner citadel of choice. Every time you mentally sort an event into controlled or uncontrolled, you're not just solving a problem, you're training for sovereignty. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who served as advisor to Emperor Nero, one of history's most volatile rulers, had a nightly ritual that might shock our modern sensibilities. He called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. Picture this: before sleep, Seneca wouldn't count sheep or scroll through trivial distractions. Instead, he'd mentally rehearse losing his wealth, his status, even his loved ones, not out of pessimism, but as a form of psychological armor. While today's culture often encourages us to avoid discomfort at all costs, curating perfect social media feeds, numbing stress with endless entertainment, the Stoics did the opposite. They leaned into the darkness, not to dwell there, but to disarm its power. Here's why this works. Our brains are prediction machines, wired to fear uncertainty more than actual pain. When you vividly imagine losing your job, facing criticism, or enduring illness before it happens, something extraordinary occurs. The event, should it arrive, feels familiar, less like an ambush and more like a scenario you've already navigated in your mind. Take Seneca's own exile to Corsica, a punishment that would break most people. Because he'd mentally rehearsed adversity, his response was legendary. He treated the barren island as a laboratory for philosophy, writing some of his greatest works there. Let's try this with a modern challenge. Close your eyes and visualize a fear you've been avoiding: a difficult conversation, a financial setback, even failure itself. Now walk through it step by step. What's the worst that could truly happen? How might you respond with resourcefulness? This isn't about catastrophizing. It's about reclaiming agency. Like a fire drill for the soul, Premeditatio Malorum transforms the unknown from a monster under the bed into a mapped terrain. The brilliance of this practice lies in its dual effect. By confronting feared outcomes head-on, you simultaneously reduce their emotional charge and uncover hidden reserves of resilience. A Roman senator preparing for political downfall or a single parent imagining job loss, both are leveraging the same cognitive pattern, rehearsing not just to survive, but to find opportunity in the wreckage. That's the Stoic edge, turning dread into preparation and preparation into unshakable poise. There's a reason Friedrich Nietzsche, philosopher of radical self-mastery, borrowed this next Stoic weapon and made it famous: Amor Fati, the love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, not merely enduring it, but embracing it with the fervor of an artist choosing their materials. Marcus Aurelius, journaling by candlelight amid war and plague, wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the alchemy of Amor Fati. It doesn't ask you to ignore life's sharp edges. It teaches you to grip them tighter and carve your path. Imagine two people losing their jobs on the same day. One spirals into despair, seeing it as proof the world is unfair. The other, armed with this pattern, thinks, what if this is the nudge I needed to finally start that business or learn that skill? Both face identical circumstances, but one narrative drains power while the other creates it. This isn't naive optimism, it's tactical reframing. The Stoics understood what modern psychology confirms. We don't suffer events, we suffer our judgments about events. Here's how to practice it. Pick one current struggle, a rejection, a failure, even a mundane annoyance like a traffic jam. Now ask, how could this actually serve me? A delayed flight becomes unexpected time to read. A harsh critique highlights blind spots to polish. Even pain, as Marcus wrote, is neither unbearable nor unending, so long as you remember its limits and don't inflate it with imagination. The goal isn't to erase discomfort, but to compost it. to let what could rot your resolve instead fertilize your growth. History's greatest innovators, from inventors to activists, often share this trait. They didn't just overcome obstacles, they used them. Thomas Edison's lab burned down. "Thank goodness all our mistakes were wiped clean," he said. Nelson Mandela's prison years became his crucible of leadership. The pattern works because it hijacks the brain's negativity bias, that primal instinct to fixate on threats, and redirects it toward creative problem solving. Try this tonight. Replay a recent setback, but this time hunt for hidden dividends. Did that missed promotion free you for a better opportunity? Did that heartbreak clarify what you truly value? Amor Fati turns fate from a cage into a collaborator. As Nietzsche put it, "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, to want nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity." Not resignation, collaboration. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, dropped a truth bomb that still explodes minds today. It's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about events. Think about that for a second. Two people can face the exact same setback, a missed promotion, a harsh comment, and walk away with entirely different experiences. Why? Because the raw event is neutral. It's the story we wrap around it that determines whether it crushes us or strengthens us. This is the essence of objective judgment, the Stoic superpower of separating fact from fiction in your own mind. Take political propaganda, ancient or modern. When a Roman senator heard rumors of barbarian hordes gathering beyond the frontier, he had two choices: panic at the imagined slaughter or ask, what do we actually know? The facts might be sparse, a few scattered reports, a distant tribe moving, but the narratives, those could ignite full-blown terror. Fast forward to today, a headline screams about economic collapse or social unrest. The Stoic move isn't to ignore it, but to dissect it. Is this verifiable data or amplified fear? What's the actual threat versus the manufactured drama? Objective judgment acts like a mental filter, catching the emotional pollution before it poisons your clarity. Here's how to practice it with something personal. Recall a recent moment when you felt hot anger or deep frustration. Maybe a friend cancelled plans last minute, or a co-worker took credit for your idea. Now strip it down to bare facts. They said X, Y happened, that's the foundation. Everything else, they don't respect me, this always happens to me, is your mind spin. Try writing it out in 2 columns, one for objective events, one for your interpretations. The gap between them is where freedom lies. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb. It's about spotting when your own thoughts are hijacking your peace. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire in chaos, reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That's the golden thread running through Stoicism. Events don't define us, our relationship to events does. A missed train is either a disaster or an hour to read. The difference lies in the judgment. So next time stress flares, pause and ask, what's the raw material here versus the story I'm building? Like a sculptor examining a block of marble, you start to see the shape within the chaos, and that's where true mastery begins. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who lived in the 1st century, had a radical prescription for his students: seek discomfort on purpose. Not because life wouldn't deliver enough hardship naturally, but because voluntary struggle is like a vaccine for the soul. It prepares you for the inevitable. While today's world obsesses over convenience, smart thermostats, instant deliveries, endless entertainment, the Stoics did the opposite. They slept on hard floors, fasted regularly, wore thin cloaks in winter. This wasn't self-punishment, it was a form of mental strength training. Imagine an athlete who only ever practices in perfect conditions, no wind, no fatigue, no adversity. How would they perform when real competition hits? Here's the paradox. By occasionally denying yourself comfort, you expand your capacity for joy. Take cold showers, a modern echo of Stoic practice. At first, it's agony, but over time, something shifts. The discomfort that once felt unbearable becomes manageable, even energizing. More importantly, you prove to yourself that you can endure far more than your instincts suggest. This isn't about glorifying suffering. It's about dismantling the illusion that happiness depends on external conditions. The person who trains in discomfort discovers a secret. True comfort isn't the absence of challenge, it's the confidence that you can handle whatever arises. Try this experiment for a week. Pick one luxury you rely on daily, your morning coffee, the snooze button, scrolling social media in bed, and deliberately pause it. Notice what happens. At first, resistance screams, but beneath that noise lies a quiet revelation. You're more adaptable than you thought. Musonius taught that voluntary hardship hardens the body and makes it strong, capable of enduring any difficult circumstance. The same applies to your mind. Every time you choose discomfort, you're rehearsing for life's unscripted moments, the job loss, the illness, the unexpected crisis. Modern research backs this ancient wisdom. Studies on cold exposure show it reduces inflammation and boosts resilience. Intermittent fasting improves mental clarity. Digital detoxes decrease anxiety. The Stoics weren't masochists, they were neuroscientists ahead of their time, understanding that controlled stress inoculates against uncontrolled chaos. So ask yourself, what small comfort could you surrender today? Maybe it's taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or leaving your phone behind on a walk. These aren't sacrifices, they're investments in a mind that doesn't flee from difficulty but meets it with quiet confidence. As Musonius put it, how can someone who has never resisted comfort possibly withstand real hardship? The answer is written in every cold shower, every missed caffeine fix, every voluntary no. You're not losing ease, you're gaining freedom. Marcus Aurelius had a peculiar habit during his reign, one that seemed at odds with ruling an empire. He'd pause mid-crisis, close his eyes, and envision Earth from space, a tiny blue dot suspended in vast darkness, its wars and triumphs barely visible. He called this the view from above, and it wasn't escapism, it was a cognitive lifeline. Imagine standing on a mountaintop, watching ants scramble below. That argument you're replaying in your head, that mistake haunting you from this vantage point, how much does it really weigh? Now contrast that with the modern attention economy, where algorithms magnify every minor slight into a cosmic injustice. Social media thrives on myopia, endless scrolls of outrage and comparison, each post screaming for urgency. But the Stoics practiced the opposite, zooming out until problems revealed their true proportion. Here's the twist: this isn't about dismissing your struggles, it's about contextualizing them. A job rejection feels catastrophic in the moment, but from the view from above, it's a single thread in a much larger tapestry. Try this now. Pick a current worry, a conflict, a failure, a fear. Close your eyes and ask, will this matter in 5 years? If the answer is no, notice how your grip on it loosens. If the answer is yes, you've identified something truly worth your energy. Marcus didn't use this exercise to avoid responsibility. He used it to focus responsibility. When barbarians threatened Rome's borders, he didn't drown in panic. He saw the bigger picture. Empires rise and fall, but integrity outlasts them all. The power of this pattern lies in its duality. Zooming out shrinks trivial anxieties while clarifying real priorities. That co-worker who slighted you. From cosmic distance, their pettiness becomes almost comical. But your health, your relationships, your growth, those remain towering landmarks. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics knew. Temporal distancing, imagining your future self looking back, reduces emotional intensity and sharpens decision-making. So next time overwhelm strikes, borrow Marcus' lens. Picture Earth as a pale blue dot, your life a brief spark within it. Suddenly, that inbox overflowing or that social media feud doesn't demand your soul. What emerges instead is space to choose what truly merits your limited time and attention. The view from above doesn't diminish your life, it elevates your perspective, letting you navigate storms with the calm of a captain who knows the horizon is wider than the waves. Hieracles, a Stoic philosopher from the 2nd century, sketched a series of concentric circles in the sand, a simple diagram that might just hold the antidote to our fractured age. At the center, yourself, the next ring, family, then friends, neighbors, fellow citizens, until finally, the outermost circle embraced all humanity, his radical idea. Sympathia, the profound Stoic belief that we're woven into the same cosmic fabric. Now fast forward to today's polarized landscape, where algorithms amplify differences and tribalism thrives. What if the Stoic practice of deliberately pulling those circles inward, treating strangers as neighbors, opponents as kindred, could dissolve modern divisions? Think about someone you instinctively otherize, maybe a political rival, a dismissive coworker, or even a faceless online critic. The Stoic move isn't to agree with them, but to recognize their shared humanity. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire of countless cultures and creeds, yet he wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." When you're tempted to vilify, pause and ask, what fears or desires might drive this person? Have I ever felt similarly? This isn't about surrendering principles. It's about refusing to let conflict erase another's personhood. History's greatest peacemakers, from Gandhi to Mandela, practiced this cognitive shift. Mandela studied Afrikaans in prison to understand his jailer's perspective. Gandhi read the Bible alongside Hindu texts. Both grasped what the Stoics taught. Dehumanization is the real enemy, not the human across the divide. Try this today. Pick one person you've mentally placed outside your circles. Find one tangible commonality, a love for their children, frustration with bureaucracy, even something as simple as preferring sunny days. That small bridge weakens the illusion of separateness. Modern neuroscience confirms the wisdom here. When we humanize others, the brain's threat centers quiet, while empathy networks activate. The Stoics didn't have fMRI scans, but they knew this truth. Conflict shrinks when we see ourselves in the stranger. Hieracles circles aren't just philosophy, they're social technology. Every time you mentally drag someone inward from opponent to fellow traveler, you're not just resolving a dispute, you're repairing the world one circle at a time. Death was Cotta the Younger's final act of defiance. When Julius Caesar's forces closed in, the Stoic senator didn't plead or bargain. He read Plato's Phaedo, a dialogue on the immortality of the soul, then calmly took his own life rather than surrender to tyranny. His last words, "Now I am master of myself." This is Memento Mori at its most electrifying, not some morbid fixation, but a blazing reminder that our days are numbered, and what we do with them is our ultimate act of resistance. Modern culture drowns us in trivial distractions, endless notifications, manufactured outrage, the dopamine treadmill of consumption. But the Stoics wielded death as a lens to crystallize priorities. Seneca wrote letters from his deathbed urging his friend Lucilius to live as if each hour were your last, not to incite panic but to ignite purpose. Try this thought experiment. If a doctor gave you 1 year to live, what petty concerns would instantly vanish? That grudge you've nursed for months. The approval you crave from dismissive colleagues. Suddenly, only what's elemental remains: love, creation, the moments that swell your chest with quiet awe. Here's the paradox: embracing mortality doesn't shrink life, it expands it. Steve Jobs famously said death was life's change agent, clearing out the old to make way for the new. The Roman Stoics went further. They saw death as the ultimate accountability partner. Picture Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the known world, scribbling in his journal, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not a threat, but a liberation. When you stop pretending time is infinite, every no becomes easier, every yes more intentional. History's most courageous figures, from civil rights leaders to whistleblowers, shared this trait. They acted as if their time was already running out. Why? Because Memento Mori isn't about dying. It's about wresting your attention back from tyranny's greatest weapon, the illusion of endless tomorrows. The dictator wants you distracted, divided, numb. The Stoic answer: wake each morning and ask, if this were my final day, would I spend it this way? The question doesn't demand grand gestures, just the quiet courage to remove one mask, speak one truth, or finally begin that neglected project whispering to you at night. So tonight, light a candle and face the one deadline no productivity hack can cheat. Let it scorch away the trivial and reveal what's left, your unlived life waiting. As Seneca warned, you act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire. Time to choose: will your days be stolen or sovereign? Seneca once watched a man stomp through the streets of Rome, red-faced and shouting after spilling his wine, an outburst so disproportionate, Seneca noted, as if all the amphorae in Campania had shattered. This is the heart of proportional response, recognizing how often we summon tsunamis to handle splashes. That email typo, your brain reacts like it's a career-ending scandal. A delayed text reply, cue the relationship autopsy. Seneca's razor-sharp observation, we suffer more in imagination than reality, cuts to a truth modern neuroscience confirms. Our threat detection systems haven't updated since we dodged saber-tooths. The result: we deploy emotional artillery against inconveniences that deserve, at most, a shrug. Take traffic jams, the universal irritant. Your cortisol spikes as if this gridlock is a life or death crisis. But measure it against actual crises, a loved one's illness, sudden job loss, and the distortion becomes clear. The Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore annoyances. They taught us to calibrate our reactions like a scientist adjusting a microscope. Marcus Aurelius handled barbarian invasions with the same mental framework you can apply to a rude barrister. Does this demand fury, or would a deep breath suffice? Here's the challenge: next time frustration flares, pause and rate it on a 1 to 10 scale of true significance. That coworker taking credit for your idea. Maybe a 6 worth addressing, not worth losing sleep over. The Wi-Fi cutting out during your show, hardly a 1. This simple act of grading forces your brain off autopilot and into deliberate assessment. You'll start noticing how many 11s you've assigned to 2s. The magic lies in the gap between stimulus and response, that sacred pause where choice lives. Seneca described it as the space where our freedom dwells. A modern CEO facing a PR scandal and a parent dealing with a toddler's meltdown both wield the same tool, the momentary step back to ask, what's the measured reply here? Not repression, precision. When you shrink reactions down to their actual size, you reclaim vast tracts of mental real estate once colonized by imaginary emergencies. Try this reframe. Imagine your life as a courtroom. Every irritation stands trial, and you're the judge. Does spilled coffee merit a sentence of ruined mornings? Does a critical comment deserve the death penalty of your self-worth? Proportional response isn't about numbing yourself to life's prickles. It's about handing down verdicts with wisdom instead of hysteria. As Seneca quipped, no one has ever been stabbed to death by a grape. save your sword for real dragons. Marcus Aurelius often wrote of building an inner citadel, a fortress of the mind where no external chaos could breach. Picture a Roman general standing atop a hill, watching enemy forces swarm below, yet remaining untouchable behind stone walls. Now fast forward to today's battlefield, a relentless siege of notifications, breaking news alerts, and outrage cycles. The Stoic emperor's mental stronghold wasn't about ignoring reality. It was about creating a space where judgment couldn't be hijacked. Modern psychology confirms what the ancients knew. Constant information exposure doesn't make us wiser. It frays our focus and amplifies anxiety. The average person now consumes more data in a single day than a Renaissance scholar did in a lifetime. But here's the critical distinction. Unlike the Romans, we've dismantled our own walls, inviting the invasion. What would it look like to rebuild that citadel today? Start with a radical experiment, one full day without news consumption. Not as avoidance, but as deliberate practice, like a musician muting distractions to hear their own instrument. The first time you try this, your brain might rebel like a junkie in withdrawal. You'll itch to check headlines, fear missing some pivotal update. But beneath that itch lies the revelation. Most urgent information changes nothing about how you live, love, or make decisions. Marcus didn't isolate himself in a cave. He ruled an empire while maintaining inner stillness. Your challenge isn't to disconnect permanently, but to prove you can. This isn't just about reducing screen time. It's about reclaiming sovereignty over your attention. Think of your mind as a kingdom. Every tweet, news alert, or gossip thread is a foreign envoy demanding audience. The Stoic question: which envoys deserve entry? Try this audit. For every piece of information you consume, ask, does this help me live with more courage or clarity? If not, it's not news, it's noise. The inner citadel thrives on discernment, not deprivation. Modern tools can become allies in this ancient practice. Use app blockers not as crutches, but as training wheels, temporary scaffolds while you rebuild your mental architecture. Notice how your mood shifts when you're not marinating in crisis narratives. That space you create, that's the courtyard of your citadel where you finally hear your own thoughts. Marcus wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He didn't have algorithms competing for his soul's real estate, but his solution still holds. Fortify the borders, guard the gates, and remember, you're the ruler inside. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, didn't arrive at philosophy through textbooks or lectures. He was shipwrecked. Stranded in Athens with nothing but the clothes on his back, he wandered into a bookstore, picked up Xenophon's writings about Socrates, and asked the owner where he could find such a man. The bookseller pointed to Crates the cynic walking by and said, "Follow that man." That moment of catastrophe became the birth of Stoicism itself. This is pragmatic optimism in its purest form, not the hollow, good vibes only of modern self-help, but the steel-edged readiness to find gold in rubble. Consider the difference between blind positivity and Stoic preparation. The first insists everything will work out, crossing its fingers behind its back. The second, it stares down failure, studies its anatomy, then builds a toolkit to outmaneuver it. Zeno didn't just hope his next voyage would be smoother. He internalized that shipwrecks happen, and that survival depends less on calm seas than on knowing how to swim. Modern psychology calls this defensive pessimism, but the Stoics framed it more powerfully. Hope isn't a strategy, preparation is. Here's how to apply this today. Take a goal you're working toward, a career shift, a creative project, a relationship milestone. Now, instead of just visualizing success, draft a plan B for its collapse. If that business idea fails, could the skills you're building open another door? If that romance ends, what parts of yourself might you rediscover? This isn't about inviting disaster, it's about vaccinating against despair. When Seneca advised his friend Lucilius to rehearse poverty, he wasn't manifesting destitution. He was ensuring no twist of fate could ever make him feel poor. The magic lies in the duality of this mindset. By preparing for the worst, you paradoxically free yourself to pursue the best with more boldness. Think of a trapeze artist working without a net versus one who's practiced falls, who swings higher. History's greatest innovators, from inventors to explorers, shared this trait. Their contingency plans didn't dilute their ambition, they fueled it. Thomas Edison's lab burned down. He rebuilt within weeks, calling it a chance to start fresh. Astronauts train for hundreds of malfunction scenarios not because they expect failure, but because readiness lets them reach further. Try this exercise now. Grab paper and split it into 2 columns. On the left, write your primary goal. On the right, list 3 ways it might unravel, not as fears, but as puzzles to solve. Maybe your dream job requires relocation, but family ties make that impossible. Plan B isn't surrender, it's recognizing that remote work or local partnerships might achieve the same end. The Stoics called this Premeditatio Malorum, but you might call it emotional antifreeze, the preparation that keeps your engine running when life hits sub-zero. Zeno's shipwreck didn't just teach him philosophy, it proved that sometimes you need to lose everything to gain what matters. Pragmatic optimism isn't about avoiding storms, it's about learning to sail in any weather. So ask yourself, what's the shipwreck you're avoiding picturing? And more importantly, what incredible shore might it wash you onto? Chrysippus, the third head of the Stoic school, posed a riddle that still stumps modern achievement culture. If you shoot an arrow perfectly, right stance, flawless released, but a sudden gust deflects it, was your shot a failure? His answer appends everything we've been taught about success. The archer controls the aim, the pull, the release, everything up to the moment the arrow leaves the bow. After that, wind, obstacles, pure chance. Stoicism's radical proposition: judge yourself only on what's yours to command, not the outcome but the integrity of your effort. Now contrast that with today's burnout epidemic, the sleepless hustle to hit arbitrary metrics, the crushing weight of results-oriented thinking. An Olympic sprinter trains for years with monastic discipline, only to lose gold by 1/100th of a second. A student aces every exam but freezes on the one question that tanks their score. Our culture calls both failures, but the Stoics would ask, did they prepare with excellence? Did they show up fully? If so, the final number is just whether unpredictable, uncontrollable, and ultimately irrelevant to their worth. Here's where modern psychology catches up to ancient wisdom. Studies on process praise versus outcome praise reveal a startling pattern. Children praised for effort, you worked so hard on this, develop resilience, while those lauded for results, you're so smart. Crumble at the first setback. The lesson, Chrysippus' arrow, isn't just a metaphor, it's a neural blueprint for sustainable achievement. When you decouple self-worth from outcomes, you're free to fail magnificently, learn ruthlessly, and try again without apology. Think of a project you poured your soul into that still fell short. A rejected manuscript, a lost promotion, a venture that collapsed. Now strip away the result and examine the raw material, the late nights studying, the risks taken, the skills honed. That's your true ledger. The Stoic athlete doesn't win every race, but they control their training, their nutrition, their mindset, the rest. That's the gust of wind. This mindset isn't passive resignation, it's active liberation. A chef can't force diners to love their dish, but they can source the finest ingredients, master each technique, and plate with artistry. The Yelp reviews that follow, those belong to the reviewers. Detachment from outcomes isn't about lowering standards. It's about raising your understanding of where real mastery lies. So tonight, try this reframe. Pick one failure that still stings. List everything within your control that you did well. Then mentally hand the outcome back to the universe like an overzealous waiter removing a plate. As Chrysippus taught, the wise person aims at the target, but their worth isn't tied to the bullseye. Your effort is your philosophy made visible, everything else is just weather. Seneca, the philosopher who navigated Nero's court, a place where gold dripped from ceilings and betrayal lurked in every shadow, wrote a letter that cuts through 2,000 years of materialism like a scalpel. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Picture him penning those words while surrounded by imperial opulence, his own wealth vast enough to make modern billionaires blush. Yet his greatest lesson wasn't about accumulating riches, it was about mastering the illusion of riches. When tyrants, ancient or modern, wield luxury as both carrot and stick, the Stoic response isn't rejection but contempt, the clarity to see gold for what it really is, a tool that owns you if you think it defines you. Enter Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man on earth, approached him and asked what he desired, Diogenes didn't request lands or titles. He simply said, "Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." That moment crystallizes Stoicism's most subversive idea. Real freedom isn't found in what you acquire, but in what you can walk away from. Diogenes' barrel wasn't a stunt, it was a fortress. While others scrambled for status symbols, he proved the ultimate luxury is needing nothing tyrants can offer or take. Now fast forward to your last Instagram scroll. How many must-have items flashed by the latest tech, the curated vacation, the aspirational home? Here's the experiment. Pick one symbol you've been conditioned to crave, a luxury watch, a designer label, a car model that screams success. Now ask, if you lost it tomorrow, what actual piece of yourself would vanish? The Stoics weren't anti-wealth, they were anti-delusion. Seneca owned villas but wrote, "I am richer than when I had more, because what I have now is enough." That's the pivot from chasing external validation to cultivating internal benchmarks. History's greatest liberators, from Gandhi with his spinning wheel to monks with their begging bowls, grasped this truth: tyranny thrives on manufactured need. The dictator wants you addicted to their version of enough. But when you declare, like Diogenes, that sunlight and a barrel suffice, you become ungovernable by greed. Try this audit. List 3 possessions or status markers you believe project your worth. Then mentally discard each one. Notice the fear that arises, not about the object itself, but about who you'd be without it. That gap, that's where Stoic freedom begins. So tonight, stand in your closet or scroll your online cart and play Seneca's game. Does this serve me or does it own me? The answer won't demand you live in a barrel, just that you remember the barrel is always an option. As Marcus Aurelius wrote while ruling an empire, very little is needed to make a happy life. The rest is just wind rattling the chains you've mistaken for jewelry. Tacitus, the sharp-eyed historian of Rome's darkest days, recorded a chilling detail about Nero's reign. The Stoics didn't just die defiantly, they died quietly. When the emperor ordered Seneca's suicide, the philosopher didn't stage a public spectacle. He gathered his closest friends, spoke softly of virtue, and opened his veins in a warm bath. No grand speeches, no performative last stands, just a composed exit that weaponized silence itself. This wasn't surrender, it was resistance distilled to its purest form. In an era where tyrants fed on attention, then as now the refusal to amplify their cruelty became its own rebellion. Fast forward to today's outrage economy, where algorithms reward the loudest voices and every minor slight gets amplified into a digital firestorm. We've been conditioned to believe that to matter, we must react immediately, passionately, publicly. But what if the Stoics were right? What if silence, strategically deployed, could be the ultimate counterattack? Imagine scrolling past a deliberately inflammatory post without engaging, or letting a petty argument die unacknowledged. Each time you withhold the reaction they're baiting, you're not losing, you're reclaiming sovereignty over your attention and emotional energy. Here's the experiment. Try a 24-hour vow of silence, spoken or digital, not as withdrawal from life, but as active resistance to the noise machine. Notice how often your fingers itch to type a rebuttal or share an opinion no one asked for. That itch is the programming tyranny relies on the need to be heard, to be right, to be relevant. The Stoic twist: silence isn't empty, it's a container for reflection. Seneca wrote entire letters about the power of saying nothing. Speech is the mirror of the mind, but silence is its sculptor. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient insight. MRI scans show that when we resist verbal or digital reactions, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of deliberate judgment, strengthens its grip over the amygdala's panic responses. Every withheld tweet or unspoken retort is like a rep at the mental gym, building what the Stoics called hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of reason. History's most effective resistors, from Buddhist monks facing tanks to dissidents in oppressive regimes, often wielded silence as both shield and sword. Their power came not from volume, but from the unbearable weight of what went unsaid. Your version might look smaller, skipping the comment war, letting a provocation pass, but the mechanism is identical. As Tacitus observed of Nero's victims, their silence was the one thing even an emperor couldn't confiscate. So tomorrow, turn silence into your secret weapon. When outrage beckons, measure it against Seneca's question: will this reaction improve what's beyond my control? If not, let the quiet speak for you. Sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't adding your voice to the chaos. It's proving you can withhold it. Epictetus, the former slave who became Stoicism's most relentless teacher, had a simple but revolutionary rule for his students: don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. He called this the discipline of assent, the practice of standing guard at the gates of your mind like a sentry, questioning every belief before granting it entry. Picture this: you're scrolling through your phone when a headline screams that a celebrity's death was actually an assassination, or that some shadowy group controls world events. Your pulse quickens, your fingers hover over the share button, but Epictetus would raise a hand and ask, has this claim earned the right to occupy your mind? This isn't just ancient advice, it's a cognitive vaccine for the misinformation age. Modern research shows false stories spread 6 times faster than true ones because they're engineered to trigger outrage and certainty. The Stoic antidote: slow the rush. When Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do, he wasn't talking about lofty goals. He meant test your thoughts before you trust them. A conspiracy theory thrives on the gap between impression and investigation. The moment you pause to ask, what's the evidence, who benefits if I believe this, you've already begun reclaiming your judgment. Try this experiment next time you encounter a claim that sparks strong emotion, whether it's a viral political post or workplace gossip. Instead of reacting, play Epictetus gatekeeper, one separate fact from interpretation. The senator voted against the bill is verifiable. The senator is corrupt is a story you're adding. 2. Trace the source. Is this first-hand knowledge or a game of telephone where each reteller adds spin? 3. Examine the emotional hook. Does this information make you feel righteous, fearful, or superior? If so, question why. The brilliance of this practice is its scalability. Ancient Romans faced rumors of barbarian hordes or imperial plots. Today, we navigate deepfakes and algorithmic outrage. The mechanism is identical. Impressions, like uninvited guests, will always knock. Your power lies in choosing which to entertain. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this nightly, writing, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." Consider how often we grant automatic citizenship to mental content that should have been stopped at customs. A friend's cryptic text becomes a personal slight. A stock market dip morphs into impending ruin. The discipline of assent interrupts this hijacking by inserting one critical question: is this true or just vivid? History's greatest critical thinkers, from scientists to whistleblowers, share this trait. They resist the seduction of certainty. Galileo didn't just challenge the Earth-centered universe, he demanded evidence for both sides. Modern fact-checkers don't dismiss claims, they pressure test them. That's Stoicism in action, not skepticism for its own sake, but a commitment to intellectual integrity. So tonight, audit one belief that's taken up residence in your mind unchallenged. Maybe it's a stereotype about a group, an assumption about a colleague's motives, or even a self-narrative like, "I'm terrible at this." Ask it for its papers, demand its sources, as Epictetus warned. It's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that matters. Your mind is a fortress, guard the gates. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who led Rome through plague and war, wrote in his private journal a line that would echo through centuries: "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. Now picture Nelson Mandela 20 years into his prison sentence on Robben Island, breaking rocks in a limestone quarry by day, and by night secretly studying Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors. Why? Because he understood what Marcus had carved into history. Obstacles aren't just barriers to overcome, they're raw materials to repurpose. That quarry's blinding white dust would eventually damage Mandela's eyesight, but his mastery of his jailer's tongue would later disarm an entire nation. Here's the alchemy at work. When you stop seeing obstacles as stop signs and start treating them as training grounds, you flip the script on adversity. Think of a blacksmith's forge. The hammer doesn't destroy the metal, it shapes it. Mandela's prison cell became his classroom, his captor's language his secret weapon. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation, but the Stoics framed it more powerfully. Every obstacle comes bearing gifts if you're willing to unwrap them. So let's make this personal. Grab a current frustration, a delayed project, a financial squeeze, even a difficult person in your life. Now ask, what if this isn't happening to me but for me? A delayed flight becomes forced reflection time. A tight budget sparks creativity. That abrasive colleague, they're your patience coach. This isn't wishful thinking, it's cognitive judo, using resistance to build strength. History's most transformative figures mastered this pivot. Beethoven composed his greatest symphonies after going deaf. Marie Curie conducted pioneering research in a leaky shed. Neither chose their hardships, but both mined them for hidden advantages. The common thread: they stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What now?" Try this tonight. Take one obstacle you've been cursing and list 3 ways it's secretly training you. Stuck in a dead-end job, it's clarifying what truly motivates you. Battling chronic pain, it's teaching you to savor good moments more deeply. Even something as mundane as a broken laptop can force you to rediscover pen and paper tools that often spark clearer thinking. Marcus didn't write those words from a palace throne, but from a battlefield tent, surrounded by the stench of war. Yet he saw the chaos as his philosophy lab. That's the ultimate Stoic rebellion, not just enduring what life throws at you, but alchemizing it into fuel. Your obstacles aren't roadblocks, they're the very terrain where your strength gets forged. So next time life hands you limestone, remember, you're not breaking rocks, you're building a bridge. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who was exiled to a barren island twice for defying emperors, lived by a radical principle. The more we have, the more we have to lose, and the more we fear. Picture him in his sparse island hut, teaching students who brought only their hunger for wisdom. No scrolls, no comforts, just raw philosophy hammered out like iron on an anvil. His lesson: tyrants use complexity as a weapon. The more tangled your life becomes with non-essentials, the easier you are to control. Fast forward to today's decision fatigue, where endless choices from 50 streaming options to 100 productivity apps leave us mentally paralyzed. The modern oppressor isn't a sword-wielding emperor. It's the illusion that more options equal more freedom. Here's the Stoic pivot: freedom grows not from addition, but subtraction. When Musonius was forced to live with just one coarse cloak and simple food, he didn't feel deprived, he felt light. Compare that to your last grocery trip, staring at 18 types of olive oil while your phone buzzed with notifications. Decision exhaustion isn't just inconvenient, it's a cognitive tax tyranny happily collects. Every trivial choice drains focus from what truly matters: your values, your relationships, your inner peace. Let's make this practical. Open your calendar and count how many events are truly aligned with your core priorities, not obligations, not guilt-induced yeses, but soul-filling essentials. Musonius would argue that saying no isn't just efficient, it's rebellious. Every no to a trivial demand is a yes to your sovereignty. Try this audit. List your last 5 purchases, then circle the ones that added lasting value versus momentary distraction. The gap between them is where tyranny thrives. History's most resilient figures mastered this art. Thoreau didn't just write Walden about simplicity. He lived it, proving how little a mind needs to soar. Marie Kondo's decluttering empire taps into the same truth. What you remove defines you as much as what you keep, but the Stoics took it further. They saw subtraction as armor. When Nero banished Musonius, he assumed stripping away status would break him. Instead, it revealed the philosopher's core, unshakable because it needed so little. Your challenge this week: pick 3 non-essentials, not just physical clutter, but mental and digital too. Maybe it's muting that group chat that drains you, or skipping the 20-minute morning scroll that hijacks your focus. Each elimination isn't loss, it's a declaration. As Musonius taught, to be free, you must want nothing tyrants can take away. Start small. Cancel 1 subscription, clear a drawer, or block 30 minutes of sacred solitude. Watch how space creates clarity, and clarity becomes power. The emptier your hands, the tighter your grip on what no oppressor can touch. Seneca once wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it," a statement that would baffle most modern workers drowning in endless to-do lists. The Stoic philosopher wasn't talking about time management hacks. He was exposing tyranny's oldest trick: stealing the present by keeping you trapped in past regrets or future anxieties. Picture a Roman senator watching Nero's propaganda machine rewrite history daily, stoking fears of barbarian invasions while distracting citizens from current corruption. Fast forward to today's news cycles, where algorithms feed us nostalgia for better times or apocalyptic forecasts, both designed to make us feel powerless now. Temporal anchoring, the Stoic practice of rooting yourself firmly in the present, isn't just mindfulness, it's resistance. Think about how often you've lost hours scrolling through remember when posts or doom-scrolling future projections. Both are variations of the same theft, They rob your attention from the only moment you can actually influence this one. Seneca saw it clearly. We are not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting time. Tyrants thrive on borrowed time, past grievances to justify current oppression, future threats to demand compliance, but the Stoic present is unconquerable territory. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present," he wasn't advocating ignorance of history or plans. He was building a mental fortress where now becomes the one place no oppressor can reach. Here's the experiment. Set a timer for 5 minutes and pick the most mundane task you've been avoiding: folding laundry, washing dishes, organizing a drawer. For those minutes, pour your entire focus into the sensory details, the texture of fabric, the rhythm of your breath, the play of light on soap bubbles. Notice how time stretches when you're fully immersed, how anxiety's edges soften. This isn't just productivity, it's reclamation. Every second anchored in the present is stolen back from the machines that profit from your distraction. History's most effective dissidents mastered this. Václav Havel, the playwright who toppled Czechoslovakia's regime, wrote letters from prison about the power of living in truth, not grand revolutions, but small, present-moment acts of authenticity. A street musician playing banned songs, a baker refusing to decorate cakes with propaganda slogans, these were temporal anchors. Their power came not from changing the system overnight, but from being wholly present in their defiance. Your version might look quieter: a meal eaten without screens, a conversation uninterrupted by notification glances, but each is a pin in the map of now, marking territory no algorithm can claim. As Seneca warned, you're living as if destined to live forever. Your own frailty never occurs to you. Time isn't slipping away, you're being pulled from it. Temporal anchoring isn't passive acceptance. It's the active choice to plant your feet where tyranny stumbles, the irreducible present. Thrasea Paetus, the Stoic senator who refused to applaud Emperor Nero's theatrical performances, demonstrated defiance in its purest form, not through shouting matches or grand gestures, but through absence. While other senators leapt to their feet in sycophantic ovation, Thrasea remained seated, silent. His resistance wasn't measured in decibels but in withheld energy. Fast forward to today's digital Colosseum, where every minor slight demands a viral takedown thread, and every opinion requires immediate amplification. The modern tyrant isn't just a dictator in a palace, it's the dopamine rush of reaction itself, the addictive ping of engagement metrics masquerading as empowerment. Consider the last time you felt compelled to respond to something online: a provocative comment, a divisive headline, maybe even a friend's questionable post. Notice the physiological pull, the flush of heat, the tightening grip on your phone, the mental scriptwriting before you've even typed a word. That's not you speaking, that's the algorithm's version of Nero's stage, and every reaction is applause it's trained you to perform. Thracia's lesson: tyrants feed on attention, starvation is the counterattack. Here's the experiment: install a 24-hour delay between provocation and response. Not as passivity, but as strategic silence. When a rage-inducing headline pops up, bookmark it. When a colleague's email bristles with passive aggression, close the tab. The Stoics called this apatheia, not the absence of feeling, but the space between feeling and action where wisdom lives. Modern neuroscience reveals why it works. The amygdala's threat response peaks within seconds, but the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, takes hours to fully engage. That gap is where Thracia's power lived. History's most effective dissenters mastered this art. Viktor Frankl, surviving Auschwitz, wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose." Today's equivalent might be the activist who lets a hateful tweet sit unanswered while drafting policy, or the parent who models for their child that not every playground taunt deserves a counterpunch. Non-reactivity isn't weakness, it's the ultimate flex of emotional sovereignty. Try this reframe. Picture your attention as currency. Every reaction is a payment. Who's getting rich off your outrage? Which emperors are you applauding today? Thracia's silence wasn't empty. It was a deafening withdrawal from Nero's economy of validation. Your unread notifications, those are receipts waiting to be shredded. The next time your pulse quickens at some digital provocation, hear Epictetus whispering. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. The 24-hour rule isn't about avoiding conflict, it's about entering battles of your choosing, armed with clarity instead of cortisol. As Thracia proved, sometimes the loudest defiance sounds like silence. Epictetus, the philosopher who famously taught from a simple stool in Athens, once asked his students a piercing question. While the emperor is throwing lavish games, who is truly imprisoned, the gladiators in chains, or the spectators who have traded their freedom for entertainment? Fast forward to modern streaming queues and endless scrolls, and his point lands like a hammer. Tyranny doesn't always march in with soldiers. Sometimes it tiptoes in with a laugh track and a dopamine drip. The Roman emperors perfected this playbook: distract the masses with chariot races and free grain, and they'll overlook the erosion of their liberties. Today's spectacles just wear different costumes, binge-worthy series that blur whole weekends, outrage cycles masquerading as news, viral challenges that hijack attention for empty clicks. The mechanism is identical. Keep people too amused or agitated to notice what's being taken. Consider the last time you lost hours to something that left you feeling hollow afterward. Maybe it was a rabbit hole of celebrity gossip, or a political debate where the real issues were buried under performative shouting. The Stoics called these false pleasures, experiences that mimic fulfillment but drain your agency like a slow leak. Seneca warned, the mob is entertained either by pleasure or by fear. Modern algorithms have simply weaponized both, feeding you alternating hits of indignation and escapism until your attention is too fractured to focus on what truly matters. Here's the experiment. Track your screen time this week, but don't just tally the hours, categorize them. How many minutes were spent on spectacle versus substance? Spectacle isn't just mindless entertainment. It's anything designed to trigger emotional spikes without meaningful payoff. That viral video of a stranger's public meltdown. Spectacle, the heated online debate that changed no minds. Spectacle, even so-called educational content, can qualify if it leaves you feeling informed but powerless. The Stoic distinction is stark. Does this engage my critical mind or merely my nervous system? History's most effective resistors saw through this ruse. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, writing in Soviet labor camps, noted that the first step to breaking free wasn't brute force, it was refusing to play along with the regime's distractions. While others numbed themselves with state-approved propaganda, he preserved his clarity by memorizing poetry and composing novels in his head. Your version might look smaller, swapping one doomscroll session for a walk, or replacing a reality show with a documentary that sparks real curiosity. The goal isn't austerity, it's intentionality. Try this audit tonight. Open your browser history or streaming platform. For every entry, ask Epictetus' question: did this expand my capacity for thought and action or shrink it? The answer isn't about guilt, it's about sovereignty. Every minute you reclaim from spectacle is a minute you invest in your inner citadel. As Marcus Aurelius wrote while ruling an empire addicted to games, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The real rebellion isn't rejecting all entertainment. It's knowing the difference between a diversion and a chains. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote these startling words in his private journal: "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. Now picture Nero, his predecessor, a man who commanded armies, executed rivals, and even allegedly fiddled while Rome burned. History remembers one as a philosopher king, the other as a tyrant. What separated them wasn't military might or political cunning, but their understanding of power's deepest paradox. Control over others is an illusion, while mastery of the self is the only sovereignty that lasts. Think about the modern executive who dominates boardrooms but can't resist scrolling for likes at midnight, or the influencer with millions of followers who crumbles under a single critical comment. Their external power is real, but fragile, tethered to approval they can't dictate. Contrast that with the single parent working 2 jobs who still finds quiet joy in bedtime stories, or the artist who creates despite indifference. The Stoics would argue the latter hold truer power because their worth isn't mortgaged to outside validation. Here's the inversion: every time you chase control over people or circumstances to fill an inner void, you're not gaining power, you're surrendering it. Seneca saw this clearly when advising Nero: "A throne doesn't make a king any more than a horse makes a rider. The real test: strip away the titles, the followers, the accolades." Who remains? Marcus, ruling an empire, still interrogated his own motives daily. Am I clinging to the praise of men? Your version might not involve empires, but the question echoes: do you measure your worth by promotions, likes, or others' opinions? History's most enduring figures embody this paradox. Gandhi toppled an empire without holding office. Mandela led a nation after decades in a cell. Neither had traditional power, yet both transformed the world because they'd first conquered their need for external validation. The modern workplace offers a microcosm. The colleague who loudly claims credit often feels insecure, while the quiet contributor who knows their value doesn't need the spotlight to feel seen. Try this audit today. List 3 areas where you seek outside approval, maybe your social media metrics, a superior's praise, or keeping up with peers' lifestyles. Now imagine those vanished. What core strengths would remain? That's your unconquerable territory. As Epictetus, born a slave, taught, no one is free who is not master of himself. The tyrant craves control because he fears his own emptiness. The Stoic, they've already claimed the only throne that matters, the one within. Seneca once observed that life seems short only because we squander it, an insight that cuts to the heart of every modern tyranny, from autocrats to algorithms. They share the same playbook: keep people trapped in reactive cycles, chasing immediate gratification or putting out daily fires until their days blur into years of unremembered urgency. But here's the Stoic counterstrike. When Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it," he wasn't offering a platitude, he was handing you a temporal weapon. Consider Martin Luther King Jr., facing down snarling police dogs and fire hoses in Birmingham. While segregationists relied on shock and/or tactics, violent outbursts designed to provoke knee-jerk reactions, King trained his movement in disciplined endurance. Protesters practiced taking blows without striking back, singing hymns as they were dragged to paddy wagons. This wasn't just moral high ground, it was strategic time bending. By refusing to play by the oppressor's frenetic rhythm, they stretched moments into monuments. A single dignified march, broadcast nationwide, did more to shift public opinion than 1,000 rushed retaliations ever could. The tyranny of the immediate thrives on our biological wiring. Our brains are primed to prioritize looming deadlines over distant dreams, to fear tomorrow's embarrassment more than next decade's regret. That's why dictators flood the zone with daily crises to keep citizens too exhausted to plant seeds whose fruit they'll never see. But the Stoics practiced a different calculus. Seneca measured his days not in hours spent but in value extracted. Putting things off is the biggest waste of life, he warned. It snatches away each day as it comes. Notice the precision here. He didn't say work endlessly. He said invest each day in something that outlasts it. Here's the experiment. Pick one area where you've been reacting to short-term pressures, maybe overworking to hit arbitrary quarterly targets, or doom-scrolling instead of crafting something meaningful. Now borrow King's lens. Ask, if I consistently devoted 30 minutes daily to this long-term project, writing that book, building that skill, nurturing that relationship, where might I be in 5 years? The math is startling. Just half an hour a day compounds into over 900 hours annually, the equivalent of 23 full work weeks. That's the alchemy of the long game. It transforms trivial daily increments into seismic eventual shifts. History's greatest changemakers understood this compounding effect. Beethoven composed his 9th symphony while completely deaf, laboring over revisions most listeners would never notice. Marie Curie spent 4 back-breaking years processing tons of pitchblende ore just to isolate a fraction of a gram of radium. Neither knew if their efforts would bear fruit, but they trusted in the exponential power of showing up. The modern parallel might be the programmer contributing to open-source projects in stolen moments, or the teacher planting seeds of critical thinking in 6th graders who'll vote in a decade. Your challenge tonight is to perform a legacy audit. Light a candle and journal 2 lists, one for actions that merely maintain the status quo, paying bills, answering emails, another for investments that ripple forward, mentoring a younger colleague, drafting that business plan, healing a family rift. The gap between them is where your long game lives. As Seneca reminded Lucilius, life is divided into 3 periods: past, present, and future. Of these, the present is short, the future uncertain, the past immutable. The tyrant wants you shackled to the urgent present. The Stoic, they're already speaking to the future version of you who'll inherit today's choices. That's the real rebellion, planting trees under whose shade you may never sit, but whose roots will outlast every passing storm. Cleans, the Stoic philosopher who carried water by night to fund his studies, left us a line that cuts through 2,000 years of noise. The road to virtue is steep and rugged at first, but becomes easier the higher we climb. Picture him back bent under heavy jugs, feet numb from cold Athenian streets, yet his mind alight with ideas that would outlast empires. That's the essence of self as protagonist, not some ego-driven fantasy, but the quiet recognition that your struggles aren't evidence of failure, they're the raw material of your hero's journey. The Stoics didn't see life as something that happens to you, but as something you meet, like a sculptor meeting marble, knowing every strike of the chisel reveals the form within. Now imagine your current challenge, a career pivot, a strained relationship, a creative block, as if it were a scene in a biopic about your life. Not the sanitized Hollywood version, but the gritty documentary where the protagonist grows through adversity. What if that looming deadline isn't just stress, but your training montage? That difficult conversation isn't awkwardness, but the pivotal dialogue where your character finds their voice. This shift isn't about denying hardship, it's about reframing it as necessary terrain. Marcus Aurelius journaled to himself, "The obstacle is the way." Not in spite of the obstacle, because of it. Here's where Stoicism diverges from shallow self-help. The hero's journey isn't about guaranteed triumphs or skipping to the happy ending. It's about embracing the worthy struggle. Cleans didn't carry water forever. He became head of the Stoic school. But his greatness wasn't in the title. It was in the nights he chose blistered hands over surrender. Your version might look smaller, waking early to write before the kids rise, swallowing pride to apologize first, persisting in a job that funds a dream. The scale doesn't matter, the stance does. Try this tonight. Open a journal and write a letter from your 80-year-old self, the version of you who's weathered storms and earned wisdom. What would they thank you for enduring now? What choices would they urge you to make? When Seneca imagined his older self judging his present actions, he called it living backward. That future you isn't some distant stranger. They're the hero who emerged because you didn't abandon the climb. History's most resilient figures, from Harriet Tubman to Viktor Frankl, shared this trait. They saw themselves as actors in a larger narrative. Not victims of circumstance, but protagonists shaping meaning through response. Frankl, surviving Auschwitz, wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude." That's the Stoic twist. The hero isn't defined by their superhuman strength, but by their unwavering authorship of their inner world. So next time chaos strikes, hear Clean's whispering, "This is the steep part, keep climbing." The hero's journey was never about avoiding the dragon. It was about discovering you could breathe fire all along. Demetrius the cynic strolled into Nero's palace like it was a comedy club, looked the emperor dead in the eye, and said, "You threaten me with death, but nature threatens you." The room froze, Nero's guards gripped their swords, and then Demetrius laughed. That moment captures Stoicism's best-kept secret. Humor isn't just relief from life's absurdities, it's a weapon against tyranny. While most think of Stoics as stone-faced ascetics, the truth is far richer. Seneca filled his letters with biting wit. Marcus Aurelius joked about the shortness of life even as he ruled an empire, and Epictetus, the philosopher who endured slavery, taught that laughter is the ultimate power move when facing the unbeatable. Because what's left for a tyrant to exploit when you've already turned their threats into punchlines? Fast forward to today's digital age, where satirists wield memes like scalpels against corruption and incompetence. A dictator's grandiose speech gets remixed into a viral dance track. A corporate scandal becomes a late-night monologue's fuel. This isn't just entertainment, it's cognitive jujitsu. When you reframe oppression as absurdity, you drain its terror. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics knew. Humor activates the prefrontal cortex, short-circuiting the amygdala's panic response. That's why authoritarian regimes arrest comedians first. They know laughter dissolves fear faster than bullets. Here's the experiment. Pick one current frustration, maybe a petty bureaucratic rule, a tone-deaf corporate email, or a political hypocrisy that makes your blood boil. Now imagine explaining it to an alien visitor. How ridiculous would it sound? A species that divides itself by invisible lines, then fights over which color to paint those lines. Workers who sit in glowing boxes, tapping buttons to earn digital tokens they trade for flavored foam. The more absurd you make it, the clearer the truth becomes. Much of what we treat as sacred is just collective make-believe. The Stoic twist: this isn't about cynicism, it's about clarity. Demetrius didn't laugh because he didn't care, he laughed because he cared too much to let Nero dictate his emotional weather. When Jon Stewart dismantled political spin with a raised eyebrow, or when TikTokers turned censorship into satire, they were channeling the same spirit. Humor becomes defiance when it refuses to treat the unserious as serious. Try this tonight. Turn your biggest gripe into a comic strip or a mock award. World's most creative tax evasion. Gold medal in mental gymnastics. The act of crafting the joke forces your brain to step outside the system it's raging against. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote, the object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. Sometimes the sanest response to madness isn't a scream, it's a snort. History's most resilient movements have harnessed this. Soviet dissidents circulated political jokes like contraband. Churchill diffused Nazi bombs with one-liners. Even in concentration camps, prisoners told dark jokes not to deny suffering, but to deny their captors the final victory over their spirit. Your version might be subtler, mocking a micromanager's pointless policy with an exaggerated compliance email, or labeling your to-do list, "How to pretend I control the universe." The goal isn't to trivialize real pain, but to expose fake power. When Seneca quipped, "No man was ever wise by chance," he might have added, "and no tyrant was ever toppled without someone laughing first." So next time absurdity rears its head, don't just resist it, ridicule it, because the ultimate rebellion isn't just thinking for yourself, it's laughing for yourself too. After 23 cognitive patterns refined through fire, from Roman emperors facing barbarian hordes to modern minds navigating digital chaos, what remains? Not scattered tactics, but 3 unshakable Stoic superpowers: the mastery of perception, action, and will. Picture them as a triune shield against tyranny's oldest tricks. First, perception, the lens through which Seneca could watch his wealth confiscated and say, "Is this all you take? I still have my true possessions." Then action, the disciplined response of Cotta walking barefoot through Rome's snow to prove luxury couldn't soften him. Finally, will, Epictetus, the former slave, teaching that freedom isn't given but forged in the space between stimulus and response. These aren't abstract ideals, they're the operating system of unbreakable minds. Tyrants and chaos merchants rely on one fatal flaw in human cognition: our tendency to confuse the map for the territory. A dictator doesn't need to control reality, just your interpretation of it. Modern outrage cycles, ancient propaganda, even personal self-doubt all thrive on this distortion. The Stoic correction: treat every impression like a suspicious package, inspect it before accepting delivery. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed," he wasn't denying pain. He was revealing the secret menu of the mind. You can't always control what happens, but you can always control what it means. Now the pivot from philosophy to practice. This week, pick just one pattern to pressure test in your life. Maybe it's the dichotomy of control, sorting stressors into mine and not mine like mental laundry. Or Amor Fati, hugging that missed train as a chance to finally read that book. Even something as simple as the 24-hour rule, letting provocations marinate before responding, can reveal how much of your energy has been hijacked by false urgency. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Every time you spot an automatic reaction and choose differently, you're not just solving a problem, you're rewriting your cognitive code. Epictetus, who knew true bondage and true freedom, left us the ultimate key. No man is free who is not master of himself, not master of his circumstances, his reputation, or his comfort, but of his own judgments and choices. That's the revolution no army can crush. So here's your invitation. In the comments, name your chosen pattern and one small way you'll practice it. Not grand declarations, but concrete experiments, like resisting the urge to check news first thing tomorrow, or thanking a difficult person for being your patience coach. Because freedom isn't seized in one heroic moment. It's claimed in daily acts of quiet sovereignty, each one a stone in the foundation of your inner citadel. The patterns are your tools, the tyranny optional.